There are certain groups of people that when it's known they're coming in, that the rumors are that the cast members really don't like working with them and just don't have very good feelings about them. In the rumors, certain ones of them come up pretty often. Here's 4 of them that you may have heard that cast members don't like when they come to the parks, and my experiences with them. Hey, if you haven't subscribed to my videos yet, go hit that subscribe button and wait till the end for the bloopers, because some of them are pretty bad. One of my earlier videos, I talked about the tour groups from Argentina and Brazil that visit the Disney parks and how much fear and dread there were among cast members when they came. To make a long answer short, yes, they were the worst ones to work with. If you want to know why, I'll leave you a link in the description and I'll let that video speak for itself. There were some wonderful guests from those countries. I made some great friends and loved working with them. But the tour groups from those countries, oh yeah, they were bad. So go check out that video and see why if you haven't watched it yet. But there were other groups too that would often cause consternation, fear, dread, and a lot of grumbling among the cast members. And it's interesting when you read online forums and hear from people in the know that 4 certain groups seem to come up pretty often. No, it's not the 4 horsemen. And some of the stories I read about these groups are true, and others I think are very highly exaggerated because my experiences have been a little bit different. One of the ones that I see come up pretty often is gay days. Now, gay days are not an officially sanctioned, sponsored, organized, or run event by Disney. Disney really has nothing to do with this other than the fact that it is where they show up. And it's an annual event that are organized by certain people so they can have a day in the Disney parks where they feel like they're welcome and part of the group. One of the markers of gay days is that everybody that is attending that day is all wearing a certain color shirt. When I was there, it was usually red. And that way they could look at red shirts and they could know, oh, hey, you're part of the group. Now, if you hear about this online, you hear about a lot of things that supposedly happen at the park and a lot of misbehavior and a lot of really strange stories that go on. On this one group in particular, I'm probably going to let you down. I actually never had an issue during that. This was one group that was rumored to be horrible and was actually very well behaved, that I always found people to be very polite, well-mannered. I worked 3 or 4 different gay days events, and in every case, everybody just had a good time and didn't have any problems. I think in all of the ones I worked, I actually had 2 different groups that were kind of misbehaved and out of line, and other people were immediately jumping onto their case, telling them to knock it off before they even got very far, and said, hey, you really don't want to give them anything to talk about bad, so stop it. Let's make everything positive. They did generally. Now, I heard that there were some instances and ride lines and other things like that, and the truth is, if there were anybody doing anything like that, it wasn't because of the day. It's because they were just being a punk. The rumors that you will hear about gay days, in my experience, were highly exaggerated. The biggest problem that I would encounter during gay days was actually from some families. See, one of the things that people do at Disney when they come as a big group or a family is they will all order custom shirts that all match, all have the same color and the same logos, and they may put names and other things on it. And what happens during that is these families come in and red is a very popular color, and then they look around and go, wow, there's a lot of people wearing red today out here. Did they all think the same thing we did? Well, no, actually what's going on today is, and most of the time it was no big deal, but you would occasionally run into somebody that was more along the lines of, well, if I'd known that, I wouldn't have come to the park today. Just like you had the couple troublemakers that were in the one group, you would have a couple people who just couldn't seem to realize that they were breathing the same air. I'm in the same park with them? Yeah, and you share the same freeway, and you go to the same grocery stores and restaurants, and so you would find an occasional person like that, but that was really the only problem. It comes down to people having a hard time dealing with people different than themselves. And let's face it, it's not just with that. It happens with politics, it happens with sports, it happens with race, and it happens with all sorts of stuff. And really, when people have an issue with stuff like that, it's like, not everybody's like you, and that's a good thing, because if everybody was like you, this world would stink. Kind of like if everybody was like me, you would stink, because as fun as I am, I wouldn't want more than one of me. And I would kind of gently tell people, it's really not a big deal. Treat people the way you want to be treated, and you're going to have yourself a fine day. I really rarely saw a problem during gay days. Gay days were a calm one. However, our other groups more than made up for that. And that was Night of Joy. Now, keep in mind, I am a pastor of a small church. When I was down in Florida, I was a youth pastor and associate pastor. So I know church people. I know people who call themselves Christians, and I know people who are really Christians. They are two different things. So let's make that clear right away. So when I am talking about people in this, I may be talking about people who call themselves Christians but aren't. Night of Joy is a night where Disney would have a series of concerts held by a bunch of big Christian music artists. They would set up stages around the parks. They would offer a special deal for groups that coming in. And a lot of church groups would put big groups together and come into the park and enjoy that day. One of the things that a lot of these groups did too is they would invite a lot of people who didn't actually attend the church, weren't part of the church. And what a lot of youth pastors did was they actually would invite teenagers, pay their way in that they didn't even know. And so you would get a big group of people coming in, a lot of who wanted to be for the concerts, and a lot of who were there for the cheap or free day at Disney, and who really had no interest in the concerts. And the people who would organize the groups, a lot of them had this goofy, weird idea that these kids are going to walk into the park, hear the music, and go, "Oh, I want to change who I am, and I will no longer be a troublemaker." It don't work that way. Sorry. And so you would get a whole lot of troublemaking kids, people who are looking for a good time and a way to cause mischief, and they're getting a free trip out of it. And then they would get into the park, and these leaders would turn them loose. And let's face it, when you turn young people loose, unsupervised, not so good stuff happens. And that's what would happen with Night of Joy. It would be a very crowded night. People would be kind of packed in shoulder to shoulder. So you already had a lot of pushing and shoving. But then you also had a lot of people that were sneaking in stuff that they shouldn't sneak in, taking off into places that they shouldn't. In some ways, it was like a mild version of grad night, but with a little bit more attitude. Now, I only worked a couple Night of Joys. Most of them, I was actually a leader bringing a group in. So I kind of got it from both sides. You would see people pull an attitude sometimes that just bothered me. Again, I go back to the treat other people the way you want to be treated. Not the way you think they should be treated, not the way you think they want to be treated. Treat them the way you want to be treated. And I would see people just act like jerks. You're this cashier and I'm the customer, so I'm wonderful. Well, no, you're not wonderful because you're a customer. You're still a person. Treat them nice and with respect. Paying for a ticket doesn't give you a right to be a jerk. And so you would have that kind of a group that would drive cast members nuts in the restaurants and in the stores. But there was also a lot of shoplifting, theft, people sneaking off into places that they shouldn't. Just not real good behavior. As a photographer, it made it kind of tough sometimes. As a Christian, it was just downright embarrassing a lot of times. And I would end up talking to my coworkers in the break rooms and going, "Look, guys, Christians aren't like this. Not all Christians are like this. Please don't let these idiots out here give us a bad name. This is really not what we are and what we're supposed to be about." It was terrible. Now, the good ones, they were all at the concerts, enjoying the concert, and they weren't causing the problems. But for the cast members and the people working at the parks, it's all one group. And so they would have the bad apples really kind of stand out in their mind. And that was a terrible thing. Night of Joy actually ended up causing enough issues. Over time, Disney actually stopped it at the Magic Kingdom and moved it over to Hollywood Studios. It still caused more issues, and after I had already moved and left the company, they then moved it over to the ESPN zone, which is really sad because it was a great event. People ruined it. There's a lot of things that are really cool that people find ways to ruin. It's just sad. One of the other big groups, though, that would cause a lot of consternation and for some people would actually rival the tour groups as the worst, was the cheerleaders. Every year, Disney hosts the National Cheerleading Championships for high school and college. And so during that time, you would get cheerleaders coming in from all over the country, competing over at the ESPN zone, but then also spending time in the parks. And it's a really neat, great trip for them. But unfortunately, there were a lot of cheerleaders that like to fulfill the stereotype of cheerleaders. That's not a good thing. And so they would come into the parks in large groups, and they would be cheering and chanting and singing, really kind of doing their cheers and sort of practicing, but they would do it throughout the whole park. That didn't really bother me much because as a photographer, I'm out on the street with characters and it would kind of flow into that. But then they would also do it in line for the rides and from what I heard sometimes during the shows, and a little bit on the obnoxious side. The biggest issue I had with the cheerleaders is what they would do on the streets. You see, this was another group where you had young people, teenagers, and the supervisors would bring them in and then turn them loose. Or not pay attention to what they were doing or not care. So you get cheerleading squads, and they're going to want to practice their routines. Out on cement, in the streets, in the middle of crowds, and that would cause some big issues. I can remember one time this one cheerleader decided she was going to do a tumbling run down Main Street. Flip, 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 flip. I don't know how she didn't hit somebody. I mean, she's going down and there's people all around. It's like, oh my goodness, stop, stop. Thankfully, she didn't hit anybody. But then you tell her, please don't do that.
Why?
The other big thing is down at the actual castle hub, right near the partner statue. They would want to go down there and they would want to build their pyramids. They'd want to do their stunts. They'd even try and do tosses and throws. In which case, again, you've got crowds of people around and they're trying to stack up where they could fall over. Not a good thing over cement. You'd have kids trying to fly, and then they'd want to get pictures of them doing this in front of the castle. No! And so we would constantly have to tell them, please don't do that. Now, in fairness, I didn't usually have to get onto them very often. I can remember like 3 or 4 groups, not too many. But I was just waiting for some kid to miss and fall and hit the ground and crack their head open. And so if I saw them doing that, I'd walk up and my kind of standard line was, please, don't do that. Don't fly in the air because you miss, they drop you, you hit the ground, your brain goes splat, and I don't want to clean the mess. Okay, yeah, I wasn't custodial, so I wouldn't have had to clean the mess, but still. Probably the worst part about that is the kids were generally pretty good. You tell them, please, don't do that, and they'd listen and go, oh, okay, we're sorry, we understand, and they would move on. But the coaches sometimes didn't get it.
Don't you talk to my girls that way? If they want to do that?
Yeah, if they want to do that, and you don't stop them, somebody's going to be getting kicked out of the park. Hello? Most of the coaches were good. But yeah, you had a couple snots. They're just like, we're national championship competing. We therefore can do what we want. You know some of the attitudes you get sometimes? I know you think that because you paid $75 to $100 a person to get into the park, that you therefore can think that you can do whatever you want, wherever you want, and the rules don't apply to you. Well, guess what? So did everybody else who came in the park, and the same rules apply to them. And I really don't want you insisting on your day to mess up their day. And that's where the problem came in. It was because you'd have this little group of people that wanted to do their thing and infringe on everybody else's. Kind of like Night of Joy, the worst ones were the unsupervised ones. Are you seeing a pattern here? From what I heard, it could be quite a ruckus over at some of the attractions and over at the hotel sometimes and other spots. Kind of happy I didn't necessarily have to deal with that. But the other group that was bad, terrible, were the groups that came in for grad nights. Grad night was when Disney would open the park up overnight or at very late hours just for high school seniors who were graduating. They may put on a whole bunch of special concerts, they would have special events, and these seniors would get to come in and get to enjoy the park as part of a graduation celebration. They're bringing in busloads of teenagers with just a couple supervisors. They're walking in the gate and the teachers are going,
see you later!
Well, what happens when you take the supervisors and the teachers and the kids are running loose with no supervision? It gets scary. High school seniors, again, the vast majority of them are there to behave and to have a good time and enjoy it and celebrate. But then you've got this group that this is their opportunity to misbehave and get away with stuff that they know they shouldn't, but hey, they're going to try it anyways. And you would watch them bring in alcohol and drugs and shoplift and cause fights and all sorts of stuff. This is where you would get groups that would want to walk down the street and they would try to flash gang signs just so they could provoke something. Some terrible behavior would go on. And it was too bad because there would be some really neat things set up for grad night. One of the things I really wanted to do was we actually had a huge bubble room. They actually filled this whole room with bubbles up to about here, And the kids could go into this room and just swim through the bubbles. And we actually had a photographer in the bubbles with them getting pictures. How cool is that? Unfortunately, it would be a tough night to work. I was generally out on the street for those. The kids out on the street, we get a couple pictures, but as far as photographers go, it was a pretty slow thing for us. And what ended up happening as I was up around the castle hub is I almost ended up becoming partially security. We would have kids that would try to sneak off into places that they shouldn't be, cross over fences and go around behind things. And I can remember a couple kids that I found, and we used to have this place at Disney called the Rose Garden. And I believe it's not there anymore. It was all sorts of roses, beautiful garden, rose bushes everywhere. And somehow these kids thought that if they hopped the fence and snuck through the rose bushes, that they wouldn't be seen. Not only were they still able to be seen where they were and what they were doing, but then I caught them and, hey, knock that off, get over here. Oh, and they had to come out through the roses again while they're still trying to get rearranged. Yeah, that was just real cute. Then there was the other couple. I'd gotten bumped out for break and was walking backstage and walked through our little doorway into the backstage area. It's night, it's dark, but you know what? Being a dad and youth pastor and working with teens, I just had this suspicion. And so I took the flash on my camera and just kind of flashed some of the areas in the back. And sure enough, here's another couple that snuck backstage and think that they're hidden, and they're not.
Excuse me. That's not appropriate, nor should you be here.
Yeah, they got to meet security. I felt so bad for the security people that night because they were out there in force and they had so much to deal with. I don't know if Disney still does grad night or not. I know it was a good moneymaker, but honestly, kind of like Night of Joy, all the trouble that it caused, I don't know how much it was worth it to them. And so that's kind of the 4 groups that people rumor are the worst and how I got to deal with each of them. So were you at any of those, or did you find any other groups that were at least as bad or even worse than that? I would love to hear your stories about them. Don't forget to share them in the comments. Thank you so much for watching too. If you had some fun with this video, don't forget to hit that share button and let other people know. And hey, thank you to my patrons as well. They're the ones who help support me, and I couldn't do it without them. If you want to know more about Patreon, check the link in the description below or at the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. There are certain groups of people that are rumored to be highly disliked or not favorites of cast members. Oh, my goodness, okay. I've recorded this twice and I can't seem to remember what I said. They are the absolute worst. But so that I don't, oh my goodness. Okay. This is terrible. To make a really, the biggest problem that I would have during gay day, it's still not it. Man, this is going to take me 2 takes. And honestly, I would hope, man, this is what happens when you try to record a video after having a surgical procedure done early in the day. You can't talk. And what I would tell... Okay. Families would then realize... Families would be... Hello, Lord. Untangle my tongue, please, because I know what I want to say, and I just can't say it. Every year, Disney... Yeah, Disney does that.